Calaroga Shark Media.
From Washington, D.C., where the president will address the nation tonight at 9, this is Ballot.
That's right, it's must-see TV. Let's hit this. I'm Patrick Gutfield, and President Donald Trump announced he'll be delivering a live national address Wednesday night at 9 p.m. from the White House. And you know what that means? America gets to collectively set our DVRs to record whatever's on at 9:30. Trump posted on social media that it has been a great year for our country, and the best is yet to come. Which, to be fair, is exactly what you'd expect from someone who types in all caps. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt previewed the speech, saying Trump will discuss his historic accomplishments over the past year. She was just in the Oval Office with him discussing it, which I assume means she was nodding enthusiastically while Trump practiced his hand gestures in the mirror. Leavitt said he'll talk about all that he's done to bring our country back to greatness. You know, in case anyone forgot about the greatness situation. We were apparently ungreat for a while there, then we got great again, and now we're staying great. It's very confusing for the greeting card industry. She also mentioned Trump will cover 11 months of accomplishments and preview the next 3 years. That's right, 11 months. We're getting a greatest hits album before the first year is even over. Most presidents wait until they're leaving office to do the victory lap. Trump's doing burnouts in the parking lot while the race is still happening. In an interview with Fox News, Leavitt said he'll likely discuss border security and the economy. She added that Trump could be teasing some policy that will be coming in the next year. Teasing policy. We've reached the point where government announcements are using Marvel movie marketing strategies. Stay tuned after the credits for a hint about what happens in Infrastructure 2, the repaving. Will Trump's speech beat Cupcake Wars? America decides! White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles just gave 11 interviews to Vanity Fair over the past year, and now she's shocked that they published what she said. She's calling it a disingenuously framed hit piece, which is Washington speak for, I said all that stuff, but I didn't think you'd print it. Wiles typically avoids publicity, which makes giving 11 separate interviews an interesting definition of avoiding publicity. That's not avoiding publicity. That's courting publicity, getting engaged to publicity, and then being surprised when publicity shows up at the altar. The interviews were conducted by Chris Whipple, who wrote a book about White House chiefs of staff. So Wiles spent a year talking to a guy whose entire job is writing about White House chiefs of staff and somehow didn't see this coming. That's like giving your diary to a gossip columnist and being upset when they publish excerpts. After the article dropped, Wiles claimed significant context was disregarded, but notably didn't dispute any of the actual facts. That's the political equivalent of, I'm not saying I didn't say it, I'm just saying you shouldn't have listened so carefully. Here's what she revealed. First, Wiles compared President Trump to her father, legendary sportscaster Pat Summerall, who was an absentee parent and alcoholic. While Trump doesn't drink, she said he has an alcoholic's personality because he believes there's nothing he can't do. Nothing, zero, nothing. Which is quite a comparison to make about your boss in an interview. Most people save that kind of analysis for their therapist, not Vanity Fair. She said her experience with her father made her a little bit of an expert in big personalities. So her qualifications for the job are essentially, I've dealt with this before at home. That's like hiring a zookeeper because they grew up with a difficult cat. Wiles described several occasions where she advised Trump to slow down, and he ignored her every time. She urged him not to pardon the most violent January 6th rioters. He did it anyway. She tried to get him to hold off on announcing hefty tariffs because of a huge disagreement on his team. He did it anyway. At some point, you have to wonder if she's actually the chief of staff or just the chief of suggestions that get ignored. Most interesting, she said she forged a loose agreement with Trump to end his score settling against political enemies after 90 days because she didn't want it to distract from his agenda. A loose agreement. That's not a real agreement. That's what you call it when someone nods while you're talking and then does whatever they want. Also, 90 days to finish settling scores. That's not a timeline. That's a free trial period. When asked about prosecutions driven by Trump's desire for payback, Wiles said in some cases, it may look like retribution, and there may be an element of that from time to time. Who would blame him? Not me. Nothing says chief of staff managing a professional White House like shrugging and saying, yeah, some of this is definitely revenge. What are you going to do? She was remarkably candid about the people around Trump. She said Vice President J.D. Vance has been a conspiracy theorist for a decade. Just casually calling the vice president a conspiracy theorist in a magazine interview. That's not typically how White House officials describe their own administration. She called Budget Director Russell Vought a right-wing absolute zealot. Again, this is her colleague. They work in the same building. This is like introducing your coworkers at a company retreat. This is Dave from accounting, absolute zealot, great with spreadsheets. But her harshest words were saved for Elon Musk. She called him an odd duck, as I think geniuses are, and said, it's not helpful, but he is his own person. Nothing says we're handling this well, like the chief of staff saying someone is not helpful, but also unstoppable. She also referred to Musk as an avowed ketamine user, though she later told the New York Times she didn't actually have any knowledge of that beyond his own statements. So she accused someone of drug use based on things he said himself, which is technically accurate, but also a wild thing to bring up in an interview about White House operations. Wiles recounted Musk's dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development, saying, I was initially aghast because the aid workers do very good work. But then she added that his approach was not the way I would do it, and that no rational person could think the USAID process was a good one. So she was aghast, but also kind of agreed? That's the most Washington response possible, being horrified and supportive simultaneously. On Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein, Wiles straight up said Trump has been lying. Trump repeatedly claims Clinton visited Epstein's private island, but Wiles said there is no evidence of that, and the president was wrong about that. She just casually fact-checked her own boss in a national magazine. Most chiefs of staff try to spin their president's statements. Wiles is out here giving them Pinocchios. She also criticized Attorney General Pam Bondi, supposedly her friend, saying Bondi completely whiffed on handling the Epstein files. Wiles said Bondi gave them binders full of nothingness and claimed a client list was on her desk when there is no client list, and it sure as hell wasn't on her desk. When you're calling your friend's work binders full of nothingness, maybe save that for a private conversation, not interview number 7 with Vanity Fair. The interviews also revealed tension between Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who are both positioning for 2028. Wiles drew a sharp distinction between them. She said Rubio would not violate his principles and had to get there in supporting Trump, while Vance's conversion came when he was running for the Senate and was a little bit more sort of political. Translation: one guy had principles, the other guy had ambition. Guess which one is vice president? The rivalry got so obvious that when both men were being photographed for the article, Vance joked he'd give the photographer $1,000 if he made Rubio look worse than him. Nothing says unified administration like the vice president trying to bribe a photographer. Finally, Wiles may have accidentally set new legal parameters for Trump's Venezuela plans. She said if he orders land strikes against the country, he would need congressional authorization. She also made clear that regime change is the goal. He wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle. So the chief of staff just announced military strategy and constitutional requirements in a magazine interview. That's typically information you'd run by the National Security Council first, not save for interview number 9. Wiles ended the saga by insisting the article left out all the positive things she said about the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history. Which raises the question, if this is what made it into the article, what exactly did she say that was too positive to print? Actually, comparing him to my alcoholic father was a compliment. The whole situation perfectly captures this White House. The chief of staff spent a year giving interviews, said remarkably candid things about everyone she works with, and then was surprised when those candid things got published. That's not a communication strategy. That's a confession with extra steps. Former Vice President Kamala Harris is keeping the door open for a 2028 presidential run, and Democrats are responding with all the enthusiasm of someone being told they're getting a surprise root canal. According to Axios, Three developments last week have been interpreted as campaign prep. First, she's expanding her book tour for 107 days. Nothing says ready for round two like a book tour, celebrating how quickly you lost round one. Second, she appeared at the Democratic National Committee's winter meeting. You know, the annual gathering where Democrats get together and pretend they know what went wrong. This year's theme was apparently, let's try that again, but differently this time, maybe. Third, she's suddenly critiquing both parties and the status quo. During her speech, Harris said both parties have failed to hold the public's trust. Government is viewed as fundamentally unable to meet the needs of its people, which is a bold new strategy, running for president by telling everyone that people in her previous job were terrible at their jobs. Her pitch is essentially, everything is broken, I was part of the team running it, vote for me to fix it. That's not a campaign strategy, that's a therapy session. The response on social media was swift and brutal. Jason Calacanis posted, "Oh Lord, the Democrats are gifting Trump a third term," which both ignores the Constitution and assumes Trump is still running in 2028. At this rate, we'll all be voting via hologram. Progressive founder Mehdi Hassan summed up his reaction in one word: insanity. When you've lost the guy who usually agrees with you, that's not a good sign. The Democratic Party now faces a crucial question. Do they want to nominate someone who lost to Trump, or do they want to try literally anyone else? So will President Trump announce a war with Venezuela tonight? Will he release the Epstein files? Will he be mad that his son is getting married, but there isn't a White House ballroom yet? You'll have to tune in. Same bat-crazy channel, same bat-crazy time. Portions of today's show were made with the help of AI.